use my affiliate link to support the channel down in the description. Hey, what's up guys? Is MegaMesGX here, and we are gonna be going over basically all the tech options that you can be running with Branded Despia at the moment. I think we are going to go over main deck tech options, extra deck tech options, and then side deck tech options. This can be anything. We're going to be starting basic. Well, as we see, we have a lot of cards, so we're going to be here for a while. We're going to be starting basic, like with Quem, with if we're running Gimmick Puppet or not. But then also we're going to start getting to really specific stuff like Fusion Parasite and Goddess of the Third Eye. So if you guys want to see more content like this, make sure to leave a like down below. I think this will be a very good kind of informative video where we're kind of going to do an anthology. Where we're going to kind of do an anthology of basically every option that you can run in Branded Despia in terms of tech options and just like different play patterns and different deck building strategies. So if you guys want to see more content like this, if you guys want to see a board breaker tier list for Branded Despia for non-engine, including hand traps, please make sure to leave a like below. Get this to 100 likes and we'll make sure to do it. Alright, so we're going to be talking about main deck tech options. We're going to be talking about Quem. So a lot of people only run one Quem in Branded Despia. In my opinion, you should be running two Quem. Now, why is this? Because with only one Quem, this basically cuts off a lot of your combo lines and it makes your extra deck sends a lot worse. Because if you draw your one Quem, then what is your Titanclad sending or special summoning out in the end phase most of the time? It makes it so that you have extra combo lines because you can go through one Quem on your turn, then go through another Quem on your opponent's turn in order to set up your graveyard for different combos. Then also, it allows you to play through Nibiru even better, because if you already used your first Quem and your opponent Granguignol's you, or sorry, if your opponent Nibiru's you and you have Granguignol somewhere in the graveyard or on the field, you can obviously go into Quem, even if they've tributed over your first Quem. So having the second one, I think, is very important. By that extension, I think we can talk about the other girl, Cartesia. I think that a lot of people have traditionally only ran two Cartesia, but I think that right now we should be running three Cartesia as branded players. I think right now you see a lot of hand traps in the format. This could change in a format without a lot of imperms and veilers. So if you're watching this video maybe a year from now and things are still not too different with the deck, then you can obviously use that's the point of this video. I'm trying to make it so it's going to be future proofed as well. But Cartesia is able to dodge Imperm and Veiler very well, so I think that's why a lot of lists are on 3 copies of each Cartesia right now. Also gives you a really good grind game because you can keep one in graveyard, one on field, and one in hand for discard fodder and keep rotating through them in different turns. Very important in my opinion. Should you be running Gimmick Puppet or not? Yes, you should be running Gimmick Puppet until this gets banned. If Sanctifier gets banned, obviously you don't need to run this anymore, but this is your best going first option. Branded is one of the best decks, even still without Gimmick Puppet, but this gives us a very easy kill shot, basically going first, and we should use it until it gets banned. Sanctifier is a broken card, even with or without Puppet, so if you're running Sanctifier, you should probably just be running the Puppet. It's very free, gives you very easy game ones. Makes your game ones go by faster so that your games get over faster, so you don't always go into time. As a branded player, you probably don't go into time very much. Alright, so we're going to be talking about Gold, Sarc, and Foolish. This was signed by Simo. Shout out to the man himself. However, I think that Gold, Sarc, and Foolish are one of the best cards, or some of the best extenders generically for Branded. They can also be thrust targets because they are normal spells. However, they both basically extend you into Allure, into Cartesia, in the case of banishing Mercurier off a Gold Sarc, but Foolish sending the Tragedy, or maybe even completing the combo piece by sending a Saronir, Shrouded Dragon, or even a Gimmick Puppet is very good, so I recommend running these largely. I think in a droll format you can kind of afford to cut Gold Sarc, but I think Foolish is very much very good and you should probably run it, but obviously they are not necessary, but these are very good options. Speaking of those, you have Tri-Brigade. Speaking of those, we have Tri-Brigade, Mercurier, and Tragedy, and Allure of Darkness. So I think Allure of Darkness is very good in Branded Despia. Unless you're in a hugely droll format, and honestly I don't think we've been in one yet since Super Heavy, really, to where Allure of Darkness isn't worth running, but I think that the card's very free for the most part, and plus a lot of people traditionally will side out drolls against Branded, so I think that Allure kind of goes free with Branded for the most part. It helps you see your engine going second. It's very good in that respect. It also helps you cycle through some of your bricks very easily because you run a lot of Albaz is a lot of builds are now running 3 Shrouded Dragon for the consistency purpose because this card's basically a +1 because you get the ret in graveyard plus a draw, so very good. You get more resources. And so running 3 of those, it's a brick. If you see the second one, well, if you have Allure, you can just banish it. And then also having the Tregi or Mercurier, obviously, with Allure makes it so your Allure is a +1 always, which is very good. So you can obviously just decide if you're going to be running 2 Mercurier or 1 Tragedy, or 2 Tragedy or 1 Mercurier. That is the correct mathematical ratio for running Allure Darkness. You shouldn't be on 1 and 1. At that point, you're probably just should be running Allure Darkness. But if you run 2 and 1, you're going to be able to see these cards enough with Allure Darkness to where that you're going to be able to go +1 very easily. 1 Shrouded Dragon is also has been the standard. It's something that you can continue to do, I think. It's very much just preference based. I think if you're on a high spirits build or an Allure build, I'll be on the Shrouded Dragon is very good. So let's talk about more of those options because Allure kind of goes very hand in hand with these 2 cards, Nadir Servant and Branded in High Spirit. And we'll put in Maximus for the Nadir Servant. I think that right now you see a lot of people running Branded in High Spirits over Nadir Servant, but in the past I think you've seen more people run Nadir Servant actually in the past. I mean, you see Master Duel actually putting the card to 2. It's a very broken card. A lot of the time this card can result in a 1-card combo for a Gimmick Puppet Nightmare. If you send the Tri-Brigade Bucephalus. You send the Tri-Brigade Bucephalus, which then can send a Brigand, which then can 1-card combo. If you guys want to see that, I have a combo video down below. But anyways, it goes with Maximus. Basically, you get to dump an extra deck card. A lot of the time, what you'll dump is Tri-Brigade or a Garura. Then you will get to plus off of these, and then you can bash for Maximus, and then you can use Maximus to send a Titanclad plus an Albion to basically full card combo. Very good card in my opinion. However, this card isn't great against Shifter. So for that reason, Nadir Servant can be pretty weak. I mean, I still ran it in full power cash. You know, it's a very good card, very powerful, but I think a lot of people have been opting to run Brand High Spirits for that reason. It is a very good card. You reveal 1 monster in your hand, send 1 level 8 fusion monster. So basically, you can reveal a Dark Dragon, send a Shrouded Dragon, or send a Albion the Brand Dragon, or a Titaniclad from your graveyard, or to your execute the graveyard, and you are going to be able to basically almost full combo off of that. It's not as much advantage as Nadir Servant with Maximus, but you're also getting less commitment because with Nadir Servant, you're probably going to have to run Tri-Brigade or you're going to have to run Garura if you want to get the full extent. I mean, obviously, you could just cut the Maximus and then just only run 3 Nadir. It's less commitment, but at that point, you should probably be running High Spirits because High Spirits is a bit better of a card on its own. However, High Spirits is much more reliant because you need a Dark Dragon, essentially, for this to be a very good card. If you don't see a Dark Dragon, it's really getting into the territory of going neg a bit because you are going to get your search, yes, but you are going to go neg 1 on the discard, and then also the thing you're sending in the end phase isn't as good. You can send Granguignol, which is pretty good, but you usually want to use those, so it's not great in that respect. So that's why I typically prefer Nadir or Allure than High Spirits, but it's a searchable card. That's the nice part, so that's why I like it as a 1-of. It's also once per turn, so that's why I still prefer Allure over this. I prefer Nadir over High Spirits too, but I still run like 1 and 3 usually with my ratios. But you know, depending on the format, you could, you know, pick and choose. These are great ways. These are the ways that you can play through hand traps very easily. Like they go Ash on you, you go Nadir Servant, and then you basically full combo through it. And then High Spirits, it's very good because they are never going to Ash High Spirits. They have to Ash this for it to go off, so they can't use Ash twice per turn. So they'll Ash your Brand Fusion, then you can go, and you'll usually go High Spirits in the draw phase or something. I usually recommend to play around Shifter, so wait for the Shifter kind of, unless you have to play into it to extend kind of thing. Nadir Servant loses to Imperm a bit more because the Maximus will get Impermed, so that you can get Ash Impermed on if you have Brand Fusion Nadir Servant, which can suck. This can't get Ash Impermed, but you get more advantage off the Nadir, to be fair, and this isn't always live. Nadir is always live, so. Also, Nadir can play through Droll because you can get from the graveyard, so you can discard from graveyard, then go Nadir and still play the game. Maximus is also kind of neat too because you can Duality it for Dragoon because it's a light spellcaster, so interesting. Nadir does kind of suck because it locks you, though. That's a thing, it locks you out of the extra deck. So these are things you have to consider, but most of the time, by the time you get locked out, you're done with your turn. Nadir Servant is your last play in your combo line, so it doesn't really matter if you're locked out. It does suck when you can't go Titanclad in the end phase for Albaz, but that's fine. You can just do that on your opponent's turn. Now, what are other main deck ways to play through hand traps, but also maybe break boards? Well, we have the Fright for Patchwork Engine. Also, I do want to recommend Kitt with the high spirits. If you do run high spirits, you definitely want to run Springans Kitt, because Kitt is searchable off of high spirits and it's basically an Allure, so you're going to be able to on certain hands, be able to go search, do your combo. Also, Kitt is really nice because you can get your banished stuff, so you can recycle Retribution or Branded Sword, stuff like that. It's also free extension, so you can OTK very easily. So just run Kitt if you're on high spirits, and if you're not on high spirits, don't run Kitt. Kind of, that's the logic. Kitt's also not bad because it's a dark if you want help maxing out on darks with the Allure. Now, let's talk about other ways to extend through hand traps, but also maybe break the board. And then other ways to play through Bystials, and also just having like other ways to play through hand traps and having another game plan, because D-Barrier is out there also is having the Bystial package actually. So you can do it. You can do a huge package with Brand Regained and like more Lubellions, and then also just run Branded White or Brand High Spirits, because Brand High Spirits go with Bystials very well. So if you're running a big Bystial package, you might as well run 3 Brand High Spirits, and that's kind of like the reverse. If you're running Brand High Spirits, you might as well run a bunch of Bystials, so you have the best bridge for a Brand High Spirits, a Dark Dragon. I think in a format with a lot of D-Barrier and like other things where you need to have the ability to play through hand traps and put bodies on the field, the Bystials allow you to do that. They also help you combo because they are dark, so they can bridge with your extenders like Allure Darkness and High Spirits, but also they can get you into your combo with Nadir, which helps you send a Brand Spell or Trap card to the graveyard, or Lubellion, which helps you get into Brand Lost or Brand Regained, or even Branded Beast, which allows you to then pop a card on your opponent's side of the field. Also lets you set Lost in the end phase, which is really good, or another one, so very good. Brand Regain lets you get just a lot of advantage. Recycled Brand spells and trap cards. It's really good in the Synchro version, but Synchro version got a lot worse with Baron and Savage bans, so not really going to talk too much about the Synchro version. Druid Storm is very good. It's basically the best one because if you fuse off with it on the field with like Poly or something, you will pop a card, so very good. But Baldrake's also a very good end board piece because you use only lights and darks, so you can tribute basically any card on your field basically for a Solemn Warning, which is very good. To search off of Magnum. Magnum's actually one of the best main deckable ones because you can search any brand in your deck like a Albaz or Shrouded Dragon for follow-up, or in the graveyard. Very good. Also, I forgot to talk about Brightest Blazing Branded King. This card's very good. It's one of the most obscure cards in Branded, but it's also made deckable. Basically, it's a on-field negate for everything as long as you have a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz, and negate the effects of all their face-up cards on the field currently until the end phase. So basically, all the face-up cards that are on there when this card is activated get negated for the rest of the turn. So it can get over things like Stun for that reason, or you can get over things like Called By if you chain this to Called By or Droplet. Very good. One of your only in-way engine outs for getting around Droplet and Called By, which is one of your biggest outs. You know, a lot of people main those. Speaking about board breakers and speaking about Droplet, here's Droplet, here's Super Poly, here's Thrust, here's Talents. So I think that these are the best board breakers in Branded Despia for the most part. So I think that, and Book of Eclipse. These are the 5 best board breakers in Branded Despia for the most part because they are all quick play except for Talents and Thrust, which are able to still be used going first because Thrust is a custom card which will get you out to Fusion Duplication, which basically is a Branded Fusion on wheels. That card is broken. And then we also have Triple Tactics Talents, which is a board breaker, and it allows you to draw 2 or rip a card from your opponent's hand when they ash you, which you're basically guaranteed to get ashed as a Branded player. So Talents is usually live, so it's very free at multiple copies in your deck, but you could also just run it at 1 to search off a Thrust going second to break a board because it's taking without targeting effect is one of the best board breakers in the game. If you see Talents Thrust in your hand going second as a Branded player, you break any board essentially. So I think that's why these cards are mandatory in a high level Branded deck. These other cards aren't really as mandatory, but I think that they come and go with the formats. Book of Eclipse you saw a lot in Kashtira format, but not so much anymore. It allows you to dodge Imperm on your Allure because you can chain on Allure and they will flip down. You'll still get the search. Very good. It also can get over a board pretty easily, but you know, right now we're in 2024 and there's a lot of link boards and also fusion boards, so Book of Eclipse isn't really that great for that reason, but you could also side it for Purely and stuff like that, or Kashtira, so definitely something to consider even this format. Super Poly is something that traditionally has been a mandatory run in Branded Despia for the most part, because all your fusions are very generic for the most part. You know, they need very generic materials. They're very easy to get out for the most part. So the thing is that you're gonna have to. Super Poly was always very free in the deck. However, I think with Snake Eye, a lot of people started not running this because Snake Eye boards aren't always just going to be crushed to a Super Poly. So I think that was fair. But I think in this new format, post Banlist, post Legacy of Destruction, with Melodious, Tenpai Dragon, Labyrinth, Yubel, and then also Branded, and Voiceless Voice being the best decks in the room, Super Poly basically crushes most of their boards. This also solves the mirror match, which the mirror match is very hard. So I think Super Poly is very good right now. I think you should be on Super Poly if you're running Branded, if not in the main, if not in the side. Droplet was kind of the go-to last format. I think Droplet's still amazing, but I think it got a little worse with Baron and Savage being banned because the Omnids are gone. So, you know, and also Super Poly couldn't really get around those or sit Baron it for the most part. So I think that Droplet got a little bit worse in our deck, but it's still very good. It interacts with our deck a bit more because you can go Branded Fusion, they go Negate, you go Droplet. So very good. You can usually get free use out of this. Super Poly is always a hard discard one, but also it's not once per turn. So that's also one of the best parts about Super Poly. It's also an OTK machine, so very good. You could side main them also, Super Poly, in terms of targets. We will talk about that right now. So generally the Super Poly targets that you're going to be looking out for that you want to run if you're running Super Poly are Garura and Mud Dragon. Mud Dragon being two monsters of the same attribute but different typings, and then Garura being the same type and attribute. So these cards, if you're running Super Poly, I recommend running both. Depending on the format though, you can get away with not running one of them though. I think that right now during this format, I think that Mud Dragon isn't as needed. Actually, most of the boards like Yubel, like Voiceless, like Tenpai, they're all kind of like the same typing. Not Voiceless. Voiceless was more of a Mud Dragon build, to be fair. But Garura for the Tenpai, for the Melodious, very good. But for that reason, I do recommend both of them. Garura is also very good with the Nadir package because you get to draw one when you send off and then use Maximus. So Mud Dragon's also very good for dodging Imperm because you can chain Call Dark and also just Call Fire to prevent Promethean Princess from targeting. Very, 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 very good in our deck. Also, it's a target for Albaz for Super Poly. So Guilty Gearfried was being used in Infernoble format. If there's ever a warrior format, you can use Guilty Gearfried because it's two generic warriors. Very good. It's also a pretty good effect for OTK. Mirror Jade is our best Super Poly target generically because all it needs is a Fallen of Albaz. If they have the Apo, set Albaz, chain Super Poly, continue, you know, break the board with Mirror Jade. You have Starving Venom Dragon, which is very good actually because it can go over 5k damage, so it's very good for getting over like a Purely or something. Noir or like other towers kind of things, like the Raid Raptor towers, very good against Raid Raptors. Very, very good against Raid Raptors, this card. I would say that it's not as used right now, but it's definitely one of our better Super Poly targets because it's just generically two darks and it's a very good OTK effect. Masqurade is also very generic because all you need is Despia plus a light or dark, so you could do the same thing with Albaz, set Despia, you know, or you could go Allure, and then they could go Imperm, and then you can go Super Poly and dodge the Imperm. Dracostapelia is also one of your more generic ones because it's just a dark plus a fusion monster, so a lot of the time in the mirror matches this is very good, or just using one of your fusion monsters plus a dark and against any dark deck, which there's a lot of darks. IP Masquerade, SP Little Knight, it comes up. And then also Borreload, Furious Dragon, one of the best extra deck cards right now. Highly recommend it overall. Also Stapelia is very good overall because it plays through Shifter, so very much recommend running Stapelia for getting through Shifter. If you get Shifter, a lot of people ask me, what do? You make Stapelia or you make Dragoon? We'll go over Dragoon when we get to it. And then Borreload Furious Dragon, very good card. You need to be running this right now, in my opinion, especially if you're running more Shrouded Dragon or a lot of Bystials. It's just two dark dragons. So for that reason, against Centurion, when they make Auxilla or just the mirror match, this card is very much a live Super Poly target. And then also, it's very good against Runic Stun. If you keep this on board, Runic Stun can't do anything about it. You basically just keep popping their cards every turn. You can chain opening and target your own fusion monsters with Borreload Furious Dragon to destroy one of your own monsters, to pop one of their cards on their field, your opponent's cards on their field. Very good, 3000 beater, and it's once per turn quick effect, so very good. You need this or Magnum the Reliever, but Magnum the Reliever isn't a super poly target, so we'll talk about that when we get to it. Righty, so now we're going to talk about the Patchwork Engine. The Patchwork Engine is really good in my opinion in various different use cases. It's mainly there for breaking a board, but it also helps you play through hand traps and facilitate some of your other extenders. Now this is because Edgem Chain is a Dark Fiend, so this is also going to be able to be used as Allure Darkness fodder and also Branded High Spirits, because it is a bridge for Quaeritis in order to search out a engine piece. It is also a really good discard fodder because you can discard for anything, including costs like Super Poly or Lubellion, and get a +1 out of Edgem Chain to keep up your advantage train, which is really nice. I think the only downside to this package, and it's a big downside, they're all bricks. However, Poly allows you to play through hand traps very easily. Let's just say you got impermed on your Cartesia, you can still make Granguignol that way. Or if you get impermed on your Albion, you still can make Mirror Jade that way. It's not horrible in that respect, you know, they have their uses, but I think that... Alrighty, so let's talk about Dark Magician in the Dragoon package. Dragoon is one of Branded's only Omni-Negates in the game. I mean, once we get Light and Darkness Dragon retrains, that might change. However, the Dragoon package has been a tried and true thing since Branded came out, really, to just throw a Dark Magician in there, because Lubellion, or Albion for that matter, can make Dark Dragoon. The Branded fusions are all quite generic in that respect, which is super nice. So a lot of the time you just throw in this Dark Magician, you send Albaz and Dark Magician off a Brand fusion, you can make the Dragoon. Now, is this good right now? I'm not sure. I think mostly in Chimera format, this was quite a good option because Dragoon is untargetable, it cannot be destroyed. So you could just make this under Shifter. It's one of your best Shifter options, by the way. You can make this under a Rise Heart. You could pop and also just break a Chimera board very easily. So because it has a pop and also has an Omni Negate, it can go to 4K too, so it's almost a pseudo towers with its protection, and it's on presence board effect. So Dragoon's very good in that respect. However, I think that what sucks is you have to run the brick that is Dark Magician. Dark Magician is not horrible, is a high spirits bridge, is also a 2500 that you can just get off of fusion deployment. Was actually quite good against stun decks with like things like Majesty's Fiend, so you can just go fusion deployment into Dark Magician, run over the Fiend, and then just proceed to keep playing. So not bad in that respect, but this isn't quite a format with that kind of deck rolling around all the time, so really a niche case. So I think that there's other cards like Goddess of the Third Eye and the Light Hex Sealed fusion. This is actually the better option for Branded Despia in particular, but this monster basically these monsters can substitute as any one fusion material, and the other one must be correct. So basically you substitute the Dark Magician for Dragoon, and then all you need is a dark effect or a dragon effect monster, very generic. Basically you run a bunch of those in your deck, so it makes Dragoon a lot easier to summon also. But the thing is, Dragoon needs Dark Magician in order to get its pop effect, which is only on your turn, so it's not too important, but it is a non-targeting destruction, and also it burns, so it can help you in time for that reason. So I think that you know, your mileage may vary. I think that the thing is about Dragoon is it's really good into Shifter, and you can't do that with these guys. These guys do not work as Dark Magician unless they're in the graveyard or on the field or in your hand. So Dark Magician, no matter what, even if it's banished, it can be used to make a Dragoon, so that's why I personally prefer the Dark Magician. But these guys also can act as Albazes or for other things like the Buster Blade or Fusion, which a lot of people have been thinking of for Tenpai as a way to get around the dragons, also for Dissipator now that Baron's banned, because now that is the best dragon in the game, and also just for the other dragon decks in general. I think that is always an option that you could try out. However, I don't think it's the best option, but that's always something that you can consider. These guys will help you cover for that. These can be the Buster Bladers, these can be the Dark Magicians, and these can also, more importantly, be Albazes. So you maybe only have to run 2 Albazes, or you just have other names for Albazes for when your other ones get banished. Very good options. Now, I'm going to cover the rest of the engine that I feel like is worth it to cover. We have Branded Sword. Shout out to Raul. I'm gonna link down below a combo video with Branded Sword. Branded Sword is actually one of the most underrated cards in Branded Despia. Summons a lot of tokens, basically by banishing branded spell trap cards from your graveyard. Not important. Second effect is very important. It's basically a retribution in the graveyard for branded monsters, essentially, for monsters that mentioned Fallen of Albaz. So you can banish this quick effect, get like a Mercurier that's banished, a Fallen of Albaz, a Cartesia, a Quem that's banished. Very good. Also, this is a very good combo piece with High Spirits and Quem and Bystials, so definitely check out that video video if you want to see more on Brand Sword. I highly recommend it. However, this takes Brand to a whole new level of combo, so I don't recommend this for if you just started on Branded, or even if you've been on the deck for a little bit. It's definitely the highest level of Branded for the most part. But it also gives you the highest ceiling possible. It gives you the most combo lines and allows you can do 30 lines in the end phase essentially with Brand Sword. It's really crazy. Check out the video. Libitum, I think ad-lib used to be very standard in Branded. You don't see it as standard anymore. It's a brick for the most part, but it does allow you to have a grind game past the Gimmick Puppet for the most part, because you obviously can just get a triple Mirror Jade on one turn with this card, basically without Sanctifier. So you could go 4 Mirror Jades with Sanctifier. It's pretty crazy out here. I think that this card is very good in that respect, but also it doesn't have the biggest place in Branded Despia, but it does allow you to do certain things. Like, it also has its secondary effect, which boosts your fusion monster's attack by basically 800, so you can help get over like towers monsters. It's very utility in that case. It's also a dark, so it helps, you know, with Allure of Darkness. It's not a high spirits bridge, which definitely hurts, but you know, it's searchable off of opening. It's very searchable in that case off of Tragedy, and also it's very good just for a very big power play. For the most part, I find it that by the time I'm resolving ad-lib, it's never going to be the game deciding factor. Sometimes it is, but for that reason, I think most of the time it's pretty cuttable, but it's definitely a good option. Incredible Ecclesia, the Virtuous. This card is pretty good. It lets you special summon quick effect, and also allows you to special summon if your opponent has more monsters than you do, and you can also just special summon by attributing itself one Fallen of Albaz or one Sword Soul monster. So it's pretty good for just getting out a Fallen of Albaz. Not very good though in high level Brand Despia. Wouldn't recommend it. Then Despia Theater, the Branded. This is something that people used to run in Branded a lot more, but I think nowadays it's pretty slow. It's basically just a searchable poly off of Allure, but it's a field spell as well, but we don't really have that great of a field spell network. We can't really use other field spells very well outside of Pearl or Rhino, so unless you're doing a Tearlaments build, I probably would not be running this. But it's definitely an option to help you play through hand traps. Now, some people play more fusion duplication. Obviously, this is your thrust bridge for going first. You can basically target a brand fusion after you've gotten thrusted and you set this, and then you can proceed to use brand fusion again. It has to be belled instead of ash, which is super nice too, because more ashes than bells. So I think that duplication is very good. Some people have been debating on running 3 now though, especially to play past D-Barrier. I think Nadir is better in that aspect, but definitely is an option. But, you know, also the fact you can target your opponent's spells and traps, it's very good in the mirror for that reason. And one of the best cards in the mirror. We have Fleur de Lis here. This card has been talked about with the Nadir package. You can special summon it, and then basically allows you to negate the effects of once you're on the field. Also gains 500. I'll make all your Dogmatikas gain 500. It's okay. It's a Nadir target. It's also, you can spec it off of Titanclad. However, I don't think it's very good overall. I think it's kind of weak, kind of slow, and Maximus is way better. Keeper of the Dragon magic. I think that people used to run this a lot more when Branded just came out. I obviously can just spec out or get the poly, and it's also just quite a good card, because also you get to spec from your graveyard one of the specifically mentioned materials also, so it can potentially be a +2. It's good stats as well. It's also it's a dark dragon, so it's a really good bridge for high spirits. Also, you see this more in the Prep Plant build, but overall I don't think it's that great for modern day Branded Despia. It's also kind of slow. If you're going to be running the poly package, you probably just want to run the Hedgehog, but if you're running a Prep Plant build, this is probably going to be in it. Instant fusion is something some people debate on, but you don't really have any in-engine fusions to go into. You can really only go into Mud Dragon, which if you're running the Super Poly package, okay, maybe, especially if you're going to run the Millenniumizer Strict, but also I think that's way too much commitment. Your extra deck is so tight as a Branded player, so you can't really be wasting it on really niche stuff that you barely go into, and like one of Kiklos is banned, so, you know, until we get an extender with instant fusion, probably not going to be the play for our deck. DD Orthros, also things like Ra's Disciple and Ido are things that you can run when Gimmick Puppet, if Gimmick Puppet ever gets banned and Sanctifier still a thing as other tech options. Orthros basically does the same thing as Gimmick Puppet, but you can't send it as Granguignol or off of Granguignol, which is why we like Puppet. This thing is also a lingering effect, so it's very deadly if you can get off, but you have to send out a Branded Fusion essentially to get this thing off. Ido is very good against flu, and it's actually pretty sideable right now because obviously it's very good against flu. It stops normal summons as well. Duality is one of my favorite little tech choices that came out of Battles of Legend last year. It's a quick effect that tributes one Layer Dark monster, special summon Layer Dark monster from your hand or extra deck with the same original type and level. So basically, the biggest bridges that you have with this are with Albion, the Branded Dragon into Sanctifier, very good. So you can dodge Imperm and get free Sanctifier, as well as Granguignol, which is even better because Granguignol, it's a light spellcaster, so that makes you a dark spellcaster, which is a Dragoon, Rise Dark Dragoon. So you get free Omni Negate off of the Granguignol, you get to dodge Imperm, very free. Also, it's graveyard effect, not once per turn, mutually exclusive on both effects. So that means you can target one Layer Dark monster in your graveyard and Dark monster, so you get to recur a light and dark, very useful, and put it back into your deck. So you get to reshuffle your fusion materials or cards you need back in your deck, and then you get to draw one card. So very free. It makes up for the neg and gets you back resources. Very good. It's a once per turn though, so a lot of the time it can be bricky if you run 3 of these. But I think in a format like Cash, when you need Dragoon, when Dragoon's really good, this card is going to be one of your best options, and it's definitely one of those tech choices that I think is still underexplored and branded that you can definitely try out if you want to be a little spicy. Because getting out to an Omni Negate is super important, then also just dodging Imperm, super good. Also, it's a quick effect, so it can be used on other turns. I think the shuffle back effect is very good because in Branded, a lot of the time, you can go through your resources very easily. So things like, using Alba Lunatus to spin back with Lubellion and Duality, and then Retribution, spinning back 2 of your fusion materials is very important. And anything else that can do that, including like things like Tearlaments, Havness, and Shiren, which we'll talk about here. We have the Tearlaments. I think that Branded back in full power Tearlament, we really got a lot out of Kikolos. Kikolos would be able to mill 5, we would mill Tragedy, we'd mill Cart, we'd be able to just go off, we'd be able to go full Branded combo essentially on top of Tearlament combo. Not so much anymore without Kikolos and all the names that won, so I think things like Tearlament's Havness and Tearlaments Shiren are things that we can actually run at the moment in order to facilitate certain combo lines, and also, like I said, recur things. I think Shiren basically acts as a card that can extend and unbrick hands, also mill 3, so maybe you can mill a Tragedy or something like that. But I think more importantly, its effect to basically shuffle back cards when it goes to the graveyard is very important. So you can go Brand Fusion, send Shiren and Albaz, and you get your Mirror Jade, but you can also fuse again, which is very devastating, get like something like a Masqurade or even a Dracostapelia if you have the resources. So I think things like Tearlaments, Havness, and Shiren are able to facilitate things like Masqurade very well, which is good for time and just putting pressure on decks like Snake Eye, which does a lot of interactions. So they have to burn like for 6,000 life basically before they get rid of the Masqurade, which can be very devastating. So I think that, people have talked about going into double or triple Masqurade. Actually, we'll talk about that when we get to Masqurade, but I think the Tearlaments are there to do that. I think it's either Havness or Shiren. You can maybe even run both. I would never run a full Tearlaments engine right now in Branded, but if you want to cook something up, I wouldn't be opposed. So multiple people have been trying out Branded Lost at higher multiples, whether in the side or in the main deck. Now, what do I think about this? I think Brand Loss is one of the best cards in Brand Despia. Allows you to make your effects to be unnegatable, and then also makes it so that they are unrespondable, which is very devastating. You can chain Mirror Jade to the summon and your opponent can't respond to the banish. Very good card. And a lot of the time it is your one-stop shop to breaking a board, because if you are able to establish Lost, then you are able to get through your opponent's board most of the time because they can't negate it. However, you only have one Lost most builds. So some people have been trying Lost at 2 or 3, especially last format. I think that's an okay option. I think overall it's not something I would do personally because of the fact it is still a once per turn card. Obviously you can grab it back from the graveyard with things like Tragedy and Retribution as well, so I think that kind of defeats the need for multiples, but that's an option that you could use for in your main or side deck. Next is Paw of Desires as the last main deck tech option. I think it is something that we've covered on the channel quite a bit actually as of recent. It's a very good card. Paw of Desires obviously is one of the only generic +1s left in the game that just gives you off the top for free essentially, so it's really a consistency booster, but the issue is that you banish 10 from the top, and if you banish your Albazes or your Branded Fusions, you start cutting into your grind game, so this card can be very devastating either way for you or your opponent. I think it depends on the pilot and the build really. I've seen anywhere from 40 to 60 cards run with the Paw of Desires. I I usually recommend Pod Desires to be ran in builds over 50 cards, because otherwise you will be banishing all your Albazes, all your Fallen, all your Brand Fusions, just cutting off your grinding game way too hard. But this is sometimes the only card that you can use to fill out your deck to 60 cards and increase that consistency. Also a decent thrust target, really good going second, so good card overall. Alrighty, so now we're going to get into the extra deck options, and I think that we won't cover really the standard, but we'll talk about different things you can do to tech out your extra deck with different cards, or even different ratios of standards that we're used to. So I think we can start off with the basics. You know, we can talk about Granguignol, we can talk about Mirror Jade. I think Mirror Jade you obviously want to run 2 of, that's very standard, but Granguignol is something that hasn't been very standard at 2. But I think that it should be going forward. Granguignol at 2 allows you to have so much more combo lines. It allows you to make a Granguignol on your turn and then a Granguignol on your opponent's turn, which is usually the best thing to make off of Cartesia. It's the best way to loot Mirror Jade with Quem as well, by just fusing away the Mirror Jade after you've used its effect, bring it back with Quem, 2 Mirror Jades, bam. And you can really only do that with the second Granguignol. Obviously, a Stapelia could sometimes do that, but then you have to kind of commit a lot harder. I think running 1 means that you cut off too many combo lines for the deck. It cuts off your ability to make Branded Fusion a true 1-card gimmick lock. You just need a discard, obviously, but, you know, that's pretty good, having a 1-card gimmick lock out Branded Fusion, your best card in the deck, the most easily accessible 1-card combo in the deck. So this should be going forward at 2, and it's very good, and it justifies why the price is going up on this thing. You have things like Quaeritis. This has been quite standard, but I think right now things like Lulu Wall Lilith is actually kind of better than Quaeritis. Quaeritis is quite good against Rogue, but I think against all the top decks for the most part, Quaeritis kind of just gets either bounced or slotted by like a Flameburge, so I think that Quaeritis is actually the weakest. It's been a while, and I think that Lulu Wall Lilith is a card that combos very well with Nadir Servant. It's also a Omni Negate for 1 face-up card, basically when a card leaves the extra deck. So basically it can stop Tenpai because you can bring it out through Granguignol. These 2 monsters usually come through Granguignol's floating effect when your opponent special summons a monster through a monster effect. So Lulu's a lot better against most of the meta decks in most use cases, because it will give you that negate and stop your opponent from comboing off. It also gives all your monsters plus 500 permanently, which can come up against things like purely other towers decks. But I think Quaeritis is quite good, and it's a really good super poly target because 1 light or dark. It's also quite good in the grind game and it can really just seal the deal against rogue decks. So these are definitely your options. But Lulu's quite nice, like I said, with Nadir Servant. You can get any light spellcaster basically from your deck with equal attack and defense. So Quem or Cartesia and Unface, super good. And also it lets you play through things like Synchro Zone, because you can hard make this on turn 2 and 3 with just like a Quem and like a Mirror Jade. Now you have things like triple or double Masqurade. I think that Masqurade, I mentioned this kind of earlier, it's quite a good option against bad players, and then also just decks that use a lot of interaction such as Snake Eyes. So I think that having something like a double or triple Masqurade might be an option, especially if Sanctifier ever gets banned. But I think for right now, running 1 is pretty good. Running 2 or 3 is kind of getting overboard, but you know, you do have these options to make your opponent basically burn through their whole life if you don't want to go the Gimmick Puppet route. Oh, that's ulti, I forgot. Other tech extra deck options include 2 Guardian Chimera in order to deal with the stun prevalence. Now, over the last month or 2, stun has become extraordinary force in Yu-Gi-Oh! That if you don't come prepared, you are going to lose. There is a few options that you can use to get over stun that I'll go over right now. I think 2 Guardian Chimera piloted by Sam Zhang is very good, because you go into 1 Guardian Chimera in 1 turn, clear their board, and then have a second for when they reestablish. Guardian Chimera is one of your best outs in Branded for just getting over spells and traps. Very good. Also, you have things like Magnum the Reliever alongside Borreload Furious Dragon. Magnum the Reliever can be easily made off of Cartesia or Brand Red, and this thing basically says draw a card and you can pop a card, and it's really good. You can recycle your polys, your fusions, very good, especially with the Patchwork Engine. I think you need like any combination of these in order to, plus Borrel, in order to play against stun at a minimum right now. I think you also have smaller options like SP Little Knight if you want to have a better grind game. This is a smaller option. SP Little Knight can be ran in our deck. It would just be as a turn 2 or 3 thing to out Floodgates. Then you also have Sprind. Sprind is a good out for Floodgates as well. It's also a decent tech with Brand High Spirits, because you can go Brand High Spirits with Gimmick Puppet in hand, send the Sprind, and set up Gimmick Puppet that way. Very specific, but it's also specs out Kit, so it's nice with that. Other various extra deck options include Brigand for when you want to get a Mercurier in the end phase. Also, your monsters become untargetable, so it's very good in a format with like Runic or Kashtira. It's also pretty good for the 1-card Gimmick Lock to send off a Bucephalus. You also have things like Despia and Proskenion. It's very good as a super poly target. It's also very good against the fire decks because you can target the Promethean Princess and also disrupt Graveyard. Very good. But then you have Mysterion, the Dragon Crown. This card was brought up, I believe, by Galzo like a few months ago. I personally don't love this card, but it's definitely an option. It's a lot of tech, so it can go up to a really big guy for all the banish cards, and then also it's pretty good against Snake Eye overall, so not a bad option for that, but personally I wouldn't run it. It's a bit specific. You have the Shaddoll cards. You could always Construct really is a high spirits bridge. It's not bad if you want like a high spirits bridge with spellcast or with fairies. It's not bad. And then also there's Winda as well. These aren't the greatest options. They aren't really branded cards. Entis also for the if you want Nadir to be better going second. It's not bad at all. It's a pop a card. And then you have the Horned Saurus. This card has been more of a tech card to really search out a field spell. You could use this to search out Zombie World, the Despia Theater, stuff like that. Once into the graveyard through like Granguignol. So let's go over some extra deck tech options. I think overall things like Droll and Nib are the best side deck hand traps in Branded because they are the most high impact, so I think these will be the hand traps you put in first for Branded. I mean, Imperm Ash are nice, but like they kind of only stop one or two things. If you're running hand traps in Branded, you want to be meaningful because you can't really afford to spend your whole engine on hand traps. So I think these two are the ones to run. I think it's more conducive to run hand traps in Branded when you're at more of a closer to a 40 card build than a 60 card build, so these are things to consider in builds like that. Other hand traps like Ash and Imperm, like I said, you could run, but you want to run an extensive package maybe in like a 60 card build. At 40 card, you can't afford all those hand traps. You can really only afford 9 at most. I did mention before Zombie World and Banshee. This has been very Branded. You have Branded Fusion, which can send basically any card from your deck to the graveyard effectively, any monster card, so you can run things like Necro World Banshee, which combos you can send it off of making Lubellion, and you basically tech out a Zombie World immediately, which is very good against decks like Flu, against any dragon deck like Tenpai. It's very good against because they basically need to have their typing correct or else they can't really function. So these are very good for extra deck option. 2-card commitment as well. That's what you're really looking for with your side deck with Branded. You want cards that overperform, that cover a lot of matchups, and this can be very good in a certain when there's a lot of Flu going around. I think Shaddolls Dragon is one of the best side deck cards in Branded Despia overall. It's another dark that you can just send off of making Lubellion with Branded Fusion, and basically you can go chain link 1 Lubellion, chain link 2 Branded or Shaddolls Dragon to chain block the Lubellion. But more importantly, you're going to be basically even under skill drain, you can basically pop a skill drain with Shaddolls Dragon because it's activating in the graveyard, and then you can go on to fuse. Very good for getting around. Stun. Also, you can fuse off of it, summon off a Sanctifier. It's very good. Also, you can pitch off an opening, and then it can trigger. It's just interacts in our deck very well. You can banish off of Allure as well. I think overall in Branded Despia, you want to be running spells and trap removal because you have trouble as a Branded player. You don't have any in-engine way to out spells and traps that are like floodgates, that are like continuous. So I think we overside a little bit for that in general. I think things like Evenly, Feather Duster, and Lightning Storm are what you want to look at, especially with Baron and Savage now being banned, that these cards are infinitely free, especially Evenly. I think Evenly is the best Branded board breaker in the game generally, besides Feather Duster, but Evenly gets around a whole board. It also, it just puts in a lot of punch, and it works very well in our deck because we don't run hand traps, and Evenly can be very awkward with hand traps. So it's very free in our deck. It's also a thrust target. That's what you want to look for with a lot of these side deck cards. You want to see if they're thrust targets. That's why a Branded side deck, a lot of the time, you will see a lot of one-ofs because you can just thrust them out. Thrust Search them out going second. Feather Duster, very free. It's at 1. You would run more, but it's just very free, very crucial in certain matchups. And Lightning Storm is very good. It's very free, again, without the Omni Negates, and it also has a aspect where it can get around monsters as well. Lightning Storm is very good. For more general board breakers, you have things like Dark Ruler No More. I actually mained this back in Cashura format because you couldn't really use Droplet, but for right now I think it's basically a side deck card because Droplet is a better main deck card. You can go it going first, you can use it going first, whereas Dark Ruler you can only use going second for the most part, but it's very good because you're running Gimmick Puppet, so the damage aspect, not killing your opponent doesn't matter. You're just going to need to get around and break their board and then set up Gimmick Puppet, so Dark Ruler actually fits in really nicely in our deck. I love it as a one of, just a thrust out in Branded. It's amazing like that. Gets over a lot of your toughest matchups, like a lot of those Melodious boards with a lot of Omni Negates right now. Gets over that. Keeping with the theme of more generic board breakers, we're going to look at Change of Heart, Mind Control, and also, like, I guess Talons can go into this category. I think these cards that allow you to take one of your opponent's cards are very good in basically any deck right now, but I think Change of Heart going onto an Apo or a Mind Control onto an Apo is just nuts right now because a lot of those decks just don't have an Omni Negate, and the ones that do, you'll be able to burn up the Omni Negate at least just on a non-once per turn like Mind Control or Change of Heart, so you're going to be able to, you can draw combinations, Change of Heart, Mind Control, and like Tactics, and basically just break a whole board basically. They're very good, and I hope that Change of Heart goes to 3. I would never main these cards because I think Tactics is a bit more proactive, but definitely side deck them. I mean, Mind Control is at 3. It's not once per turn. It's very good. Something that you can definitely consider. Obviously, you can't link off your opponent's cards, but you can go Mirror Jade, banish the card you take with Mind Control in the end phase, and then also just get the thing off the board by tributing off with like a Bystial or something. I think with Tenpai Dragon, a lot of people are looking for outs for them, even though our deck has one of the best Tenpai matchups because we have Gimmick Puppet in our main, so they're going to make us go first anyways, and we can just Gimmick Lock them as long as they don't see the correct board breakers and hand traps. We are usually good, so the deck usually ends up being a buy for us, but I think that people would consider things like Threatening Roar. It's a thrust target. Your opponent cannot declare attack this turn, so basically it gets around Tenpai OTK, and they really can't set up too much of a board that you can't crack, so it's not bad, but I think it's a bit too specific. It's only good against Tenpai, so I think you would rather look at things like D Barrier, which allows you to have a better matchup against some of your worst matchups like the Mirror or Purely, so I think D Barrier will actually help you a lot. Also, just it's a thrust target, so if you get hand trapped, great, I go thrust, D Barrier, a turn skip my opponent. Sometimes it's better than getting the fusion duplication, so I think it's very strong, and you need to be running it as a one of. You could also run Crossout as well right now because Crossout's very good at the moment. Crossout's very good at the moment because of the fact that you can get around D Barrier on your opponent's turn. Crossout's very good right now because you can get around D Barrier, which is really nice, because every deck is right now running D Barrier for the Tenpai matchup, so I think that either running Crossout or things like Nadir Servant in order to play past the D Barrier is very important right now. I think Nadir allows you to play past D Barrier quite well because they can D Barrier you, and then you'll go Nadir and still be able to play on your opponent's turn. I think it's very easy on that respect, and you can side deck this as well. Don't worry if you aren't main decking it, just side deck Nadir for your going first card. It's very good. I think then you have more obscure things like the Blackout Laughs, which is actually one of the newer cards. It's a generic, it's a thrust target. It's also a really good discard fodder because on the field, basically, you can declare a name. Your opponent can't special summon anything except for the graveyard with that name, or any card with that name except for the graveyard, and then you can pitch it in the graveyard, and then you can banish it. Your opponent can't use effects on field with that card's name. So it's very good, very free, good negation. It's a decent thrust target. I think it's just a really good discard fodder. It's a really good side deck card because you can, it's kind of like Chain Disappearance, where you can just basically nail one of your opponent's monsters and they just can't use it anymore. I think Chain Disappearance was kind of a worse version of Blackout Laughs. This can kind of get things like Snake Eyes Ash, Poplar, stuff like that. And it's a thrust target, but I think that Blackout Laughs is way better than Chain Disappearance will ever be in this deck. Also, it's a Looper lore card, like, you gotta run it, right? So more obscure things, we have outs for Purely / Towers decks, because we do have a difficult matchup with Towers decks. So we have things like Lava Golem, Radiant, and then Herald of the Abyss. By that extension, you have things like Raw Sphere mode. I think these things are actually pretty good, especially when Purely is a very good deck, or things like Raid Raptor. But for right now, I don't think we need it. But in the past, I've been known to run actually these 3 cards. I think Herald the Abyss is actually a very good safe. Kind of just like a safe lock kind of thing that you can have in your side deck, just for in case you play Purely, and it's pretty general too, so you can just declare any monster type and send it to the graveyard. So it can be pretty good just against, you can call Apo, right? You can call a problem monster pretty easily. Raiden's pretty good because it's a dark, and it's a fiend, so you know, it's pretty good for that. And then Lava Golem, you don't need your normal summon all the time, so this can blow out like a Purely player pretty easily. Things like Bystials in the side are pretty good against Voiceless, against the Mirror. Not so much against the Fire decks anymore, but I think in the side deck they have a pretty good place there. Also helps just like your engine. Things like Snatch Steal as well for taking control. I think this is also a it's a Purely out too, because it actually gets around the unaffected nature of cards, because it will keep targeting, so your opponent will be forced to spin. It's very good. It's also no restrictions, so you can attack with the monster. It's very free. You also have Secret Village of the Spellcasters. This might be a thing that we go to once Gimmick Puppet is banned, or Sanctifier is banned, because you run a bunch of Spellcasters, so this card's quite free. We might start running some of those field spell bridges like Cleopatra or whatever. Soul Release was a side deck card that basically everyone was running at the beginning of Fire format, but I think things have slowly developed. It's one of those things, kind of like Threatening Roar, where it's a bit too specific against that matchup and not good enough against any other matchup, so it's kind of just fallen out of favor for other cards such as Ghost Bell, Bystials, or even Board Breakers, just to deal with the deck. Or hand traps, rather, because a lot of the Fire decks are now just on like a hand rip version anyway. I mean, it's good though, because you can target the Promethea, you can banish a bunch of fire cards in the graveyard. It's not bad, but it's a thrust target, so as a one-of, I approve, but elsewise, don't run it. You have Dino Wrestler Pankratops, which is one of the best board breakers in the game. It's a quick effect. You can basically tribute itself, and then you can destroy a card on the field. Target anything, destroy it, so it gets over things like Skill Drain. It's one of the best cards in our deck, in my opinion. It's also a Sanctifier in terms of our side deck, and it's also a Sanctifier target, so you can just keep bringing it back, popping cards on your opponent's side of the field. It's very good. I think right now it's kind of doesn't line up right now for the meta, but in certain metas it definitely does. Ghost Ogre is quite good against all these field spell decks right now, especially against Gimmick Puppets coming up, and then a lot of field spells are just being overtuned. So if you're running a hand trap package, that's something that you can consider alongside a Gamma. Gamma's pretty good in our deck because obviously we go Brand Fusion, then you can go Gamma if they go Ash, but the thing is it's at 1 now, so you could run things like Delta as well to get around things like original Snake Eye Sinful Spoil. I do have my Delta, I just don't have it in front of me, so unfortunate, but you know. Also against Tenpai, there's the Battle Phase Epsilon. I don't recommend that one, but I think Delta's pretty good actually overall. Also, the thing about Ghost Ogre too, which is really cool, it's kind of like Mercurier. It can be used on the field as well, so it's a good Sanctifier target. You can keep bringing it back and then popping cards on your opponent's side of the field when they activate an effect. Some more thrust targets I want to talk about are Magic Deflector and Destructive Daruma Cannon. I think that Magical Deflector is very good against things like Runic, against the Snake Eye deck even. Turns off the quick play or the field spells. It's in terms of that, it's good against Fire King rather. Not against the Snake Eye variant, but it's good against Runic as well. So it's a pretty good just side deck card there. I think Brightest Blazing Branded King is usually just better for us because it's even more searchable though. Destructive Daruma Cannon though, this card's very good. It gets around a lot of your towers issues. However, I think it's just been ruled so that your opponent needs to be able to flip a monster if they're going to be sending a monster that can't be flipped to the graveyard, so makes it a little bit worse. But definitely an option to have against certain decks, like Towers decks, or it was good against Kashira format. You would just flip their whole board and then continue. I think Book of Eclipse might be better for that reason, but also this is a thrust target, so it has its merits for that reason. I think running something like an Imperm as well as a thrust target isn't horrible in certain formats. Also, if you're already running an Imperm Ash like Nib package, that's also my favorite hand trap package in Branded. Speaking of hand traps, Fantastical Dragon Phantasme is theoretically a really good card in Branded. It's a dark dragon, so it's a very good bridge for high spirits. It's also just a dark for Allure of Darkness and a dragon, so it's good for Boral. But it's a pretty good link effect to basically draw and reshape your hand. It has an anti-targeting effect, but it's basically only an anti-link card, so it's only going to get mileage against link decks, which are good right now, but also a lot of the decks are currently going into synchros and other extra deck monsters besides links, including Snake Eyes. So at the moment, I think Phantasme is a bit too much of a niche case card, but it's definitely there for when there are link decks and we have issues with link decks. Did you know Branded can run Floodgates? We have Deck Lockdown, Tikaboo, and other cards that you could run. You could even run Skill Drain if you want to. Tikaboo used to be our best Floodgate because we basically always play around Tikaboo. We run a bunch of different types basically, and it's at 1 now, so you could run it as the one of, but it's a bit too random, and a lot of our decks are over 40 cards, so it's not worth it. I think Deck Lockdown is a bit more viable. You can run it 3, play it going first or even going second, but I wouldn't play going second. It's pretty good. It's also it turns off your cards though too, so I don't typically like these types of Floodgates to play around hand traps. I prefer things like Nadir Servant siding in because it's more proactive and still does the same thing where it helps you play through hand traps. I think things like Crossout Designator as well is very good in the game. This is another way to play around Ash. It's either this or Tactics Thrust. I think this is a bit worse though. It's better in the mirror match, but Thrust is a lot more proactive. It gets card advantage, whereas this just makes you go neg. It can go against any card. It's very good against D-Barrier right now. You can call any card. It's very versatile. It's very good in the mirror, like I said, but the mirror isn't prominent enough for me to say, oh, it's way better than Thrust. So definitely there, but it's very good as a side deck option as well for the D-Barrier or any other things. Then you have things like Cosmic Cyclone, Twin Twister for your other quick play. Board Breakers for spells and traps. I think these are the best spell and trap removal in Branded besides the Board Breakers I showed you before. Twin Twister is a bit less free in your deck because discarding card can sometimes be harsh when a lot of your effects already have a lot of discard cost associated with them, but I think Cosmic for that reason also gets around Hugin, which is quite good, so I think that Cosmic is usually our play, but I think both are quite viable right now. And also quite necessary against stun decks. So if you're not running these in your side deck, you are just going to get, have a floodgate flipped on you and die, basically. I mean, a lot of those floodgates went to 1, but, that concept still stands, especially with the Runic Fountain, with the one-ofs. I think you have other various things like DD Crow and Ghost Spell. I think Bystials are generally better in our deck. DD Crow isn't strong enough right now in this meta, and Ghost Spell also can be good with like Nib in combination for fire decks, but I think overall, like, you should probably be running Board Breakers and Branded, but DD Crow can be there. It's definitely a good general option. It is a dark as well, so it's good against Purely, which is one of your worst matchups, so definitely things to consider. And also, Ghost Spell is good against Lab. At that point, I'd probably run Ash, though. But, you got to consider with Ash, with Hida going around, you don't just want to give it's basically dead against fire decks. And then Dark Hole was something that we actually, like things like Raigeki, Dark Hole are pretty good actually in our deck because we have Thrust, so we can just easily search them out. And also it can just like clearly just clear a field, not once per turn, so very good. You can just keep activating them. A lot of decks have Destruction Protection though. That's what the issue with like Dark Hole and Raigeki is. Dark Hole was used in our deck for the Ibli lock though, because it got over the Ibli. Not many Iblis going around, so I think Raigeki's basically better right now. And then our last side deck card is Spellbound. I think Spellbound and D-Barrier kind of go hand in hand. I think Spellbound can be used going second though, which is kind of neat. But it's only with the monsters on the field at the moment, so I typically think that D-Barrier is better, especially since it's a thrust target, but if you really know your matchups and like where to hit a deck with Spellbound, I think it's definitely a tech option that you can use. I just think it kind of just isn't proactive enough, and that's what you need to be looking at when you're looking at these tech options, especially in the side deck for Branded. Are they proactive for the deck? Do they make me go at neg? Do they generate me advantage as well as covering a wide swath of decks? Well, so you got to consider when you're considering your side deck, your extra deck tech options, and even your main deck options. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this type of video. It was a long one. This was basically encyclopedia on all the techs for Branded Despia. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you guys want to see more videos like this, if you guys want to see another hour-long video, just we're gonna do a full Branded explanation though, from everything from deck profiles to combos to just like techs you need, just a whole basically encyclopedia video. This was just on the techs. We're gonna do this expanded. Leave 150 likes and we will get to that. So with that being said, check out my TCG player affiliate link down below. Use my Whatnot affiliate link, get $15 free on your first purchase. I get a kickback on that. I get a kickback on all those purchases on TCG TCG player. 2, help support the channel. Sign up for a channel membership, 2 for $5 a month if you'd like to support the channel and get access to the coaching group chat I got going on if you guys want extra help with Branded. Speaking of coaching, I also do coaching sessions, so hit me up for coaching for Branded Despia or other decks. And also I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch. I do stream every Monday and Friday. Schedule might be changing soon, but Monday and Friday for right now on YouTube and Twitch around 6 or 7 p.m. EST. That being said, leave a comment below what you guys thought about the video, and I will be seeing you guys later. Have a great rest of your day. Love you guys.